All right, so before they get started, I just want to say a few things. First off, just because they are at home doesn't mean that this is any less serious or consequential. So if I see a cell phone out, or someone falling asleep, or somebody playing Space Invaders on their computer, which is very obvious, your whole group loses points. Okay, not just you. Okay, what hurts the team hurts me. What hurts me hurts the team, right? Very simple saying. Okay. People that are presenting online here, we have handouts in front of us. I've been told that you would like us to give screen sharing capabilities. Which person wants them? Katya. Katya, say something, unmute, and say something fairly aggressively loud.
Hello?
Louder than that, please.
Can you hear me?
We still can't hear you.
Hello?
Oh, we got you. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to make you the co-host.
Okay.
You got it?
Yes.
All right, let's rock and roll. I just need to move that screen over. Hold on a sec. 1 second before you get all crazy on me. Okay. I'm going to make that large. And ladies and gentlemen, I guess I'll just say one more thing. I promise I'll shut up. This is by far the most missed exam questions in terms of SAQ and multiple choice. This is by far, all data points to this being the lowest one. So I would encourage you to shake off your Mondays, which is now Tuesdays, and wake up. Okay. All right. Katya, in your group, hit it.
Okay, so I'll start. Our group is from 1450 to 1750 CE. Our first topic is the development of the Manchu, Mughal, Ottoman, and Safavid empires. The rise of the Ottoman Empire began with the Mongols, who invaded Anatolia, or the Anatolian Peninsula, which weakened Anatolia and made the Turkic people called Ottomans able to seize power. They conquered the city of Constantinople, the capital of the Byzantine Empire, under the leadership of Mehmed II in 1453. The empire expanded into Syria, Egypt, and some of North Africa. They also posed a threat to Christian Europe. The Ottoman Empire was made up of was a Muslim empire, and they were made up of the Sunni variant of Muslim. And then the Ottomans also used janissaries, which were slaves used in their military. The rise of the Safavid Empire was from struggles between rival nomadic Turkic groups. The empire began from religious preachers at Ardabil near the Caspian Sea. Salah al-Din gave the empire its name. A campaign to reform Islam and spread the religion began. A series of wars were fought, eventually leading to the Safavid leader Ismail becoming the Shah or emperor. They conquered Persia and advanced into Iraq. So the Safavid Empire was also a Muslim empire, and they were the Shia variant of Muslims. Which this caused conflict between the Safavid and Ottoman Empire because of the two clashing variants of Islam, Shia and Sunni. There was a battle between the two where the Safavid Empire lost. The Safavid Empire also used slaves in their military, just like the Ottoman Empire did. The rise of the Mughal Empire began with Babur, the founder of the Mughal Empire. He was not motivated by religion, unlike the Ottoman and Safavid founders. They conquered India and reached northward to conquer the Asian steppes, but each conflict ended in defeat and northward expansion ended. Their capital was Delhi. Humayun, Babur's successor, was exiled and lost control of the empire, but he later won it back. but then died shortly after. Akbar was Humayun's successor. He built up Mughal military and administrative systems. He invented a religion in an attempt to join Muslims and Hindus, but it wasn't very successful. The rise of the Manchu Empire, or also known as the Qing Dynasty, began with the Ming Dynasty. It was in a weakened and vulnerable state. So the Manchu nomads north of the Great Wall invaded China because it was weak, with Nurhaci leading the way. They captured the Ming capital, Beijing. The Manchus began to rule under the dynastic name of Qing. The Manchus were a minority in China, but took up the most positions of power. And the Manchus kept most of the institutions of the Ming Dynasty, like the scholarly exams that were prevalent in the other dynasties. And then I will go ahead and say the change in continuity over time for this topic. So Sunni and Shia Muslims have been at odds for centuries due to the disagreement of the successor of the Islam prophet Muhammad. These conflicts began a long time ago and continue to still be a problem for many years after. The Sunni and Shia dispute has remained an issue for a very long time. And then the compare and contrast for this topic was the Ottoman Empire was a Sunni variant of Muslim empire. It focused on the expansion of its empire through military slave regiments called Janissaries. Similarly, the Safavid Empire also expanded its empire with help from its own military slave regiments. However, the Safavid Empire was a Shia variant of Muslim, unlike the Ottoman Empire. And then lastly, I will say the cause and effect for this topic. The Ming Empire's decline from official corruption, public work projects failing, and famine left China weak. This left them open to invasion from the nomadic Manchu people in the north. The Ming Dynasty fell as a result, and the Qing Dynasty rose to power. And then I have one question for in class for the group, and that is, after listening to what I just said, what are some similarities between the three gunpowder or Muslim empires?
All right, so what are some similarities? Lucy.
The similarity is that the Ottoman Empire and the Safavid Empire, they were more religious than the Mughal Empire.
All right, so Safavid and Ottoman were more religious than the Mughal. That's correct. Jackson.
Ottoman Empire and Safavid Empire.
Ottoman Empire and the Safavid Empire both used slaves in their army. Hiddle.
Like you were saying, they were all focused on were they all tied with military expansion?
All three tried and established themselves on military expansion of previously established areas, really. After the decline of the Mongol Empire, actually. Good. All right. Good job.
Okay, so moving on, I have a question to start out this section. So, what are some ways rulers throughout history have consolidated their power?
Can you define what consolidated means for us?
Like strengthened it?
Okay. Kate Genrich.
Not allowing for people in other classes to move up and get more power so that they can keep all of the power to themselves and not allow for new ideas to be spread that way.
Good. Bushi, gotta yell.
Military power.
Military power. Okay, Jill.
This is similar to what she said, but one-party systems.
One party systems. Ashton.
Just getting control of the population by there's executions and that kind of.
All right, so gaining control of the population, either by propaganda or by fear. Hannah.
Making themselves the center of religious or military things so that they're always in people's social lives.
Okay, good. Controlling their social life by making themselves part of the religion also. Good answer. And Lucy?
They worked with other religious strength in their economy and make sure that their name is heard from like other places like that.
So make themselves famous around the world and strengthen their economy. Good. That's pretty spot on. All right.
Yeah, so as we said, some examples were religious unity, use of gunpowder, creation of centralized governments, and social hierarchies. Okay, so for the major trends during this time period for how rulers maintained their power, empires such as the Safavid, Mughal, and Ottomans used gunpowder and powerful militaries to expand and establish large empires. Also, as we said, the use of religion, taxes, and military to consolidate power during this period was also common. So, starting out with Portugal and Spain, these empires conquered a large amount of land during this time period. Portugal gained control of port cities in West Africa, East Africa, and India, and both Spain and Portugal set up maritime empires in the New World, where Portugal moved into Brazil and Spain built power in the Caribbean. These two empires conquered large parts of land in North and South America by using conquistadors who explored with permission from the crown. They asserted power by using divide and conquer tactics, where they stirred up rivalries between native groups and allied with some to weaken them, and the natives were further weakened by disease brought by the Europeans. The Americas were largely exploited by the Europeans for resources such as silver and exports from plantations, which were gained using coerced labor systems with terrible conditions. Conquistadors were required to send 1/5 of their profits back to Spain, further increasing its wealth. Spain and Portugal also forced the natives to convert to Catholicism. So, moving on to French, Dutch, and English colonies, France and England also took land in the New World, France taking land in Canada, Louisiana, and the Caribbean, and England claiming land in North America. The English used coerced labor and indentured servitude, largely relying on the Atlantic slave trade. And outside the New World, the Dutch colonized Indonesia, which was administered by the Dutch East India Company, which was created to increase profits in the spice trade and was given the power to build forts, keep armies, and make treaties. So on to Europe. During this time period, Europe shifted away from solely relying on feudal powers, instead forming more centralized governments with a greater sense of unity. Monarchies arose with most nations either choosing absolute monarchies or parliamentary systems, which were also called constitutional monarchies. With absolutism, monarchs were all powerful with no legal restrictions, and this was often justified by claiming a divine right to rule, where it was believed that the monarch was giving the will of God to the people. Louis XIV was an absolute monarch in France who gave less power to the nobles and expanded and reorganized the military, and also built the Palace of Versailles, which was an immense show of power and wealth. Most nations in Europe attempted to build absolute monarchies, other examples being with Peter the Great of Russia and Frederick the Great of Prussia. A smaller number of nations developed parliaments where the monarch had to share its power with a small legislative body. The most famous of these arose in England, and oftentimes there was a rivalry between the monarch and the parliament, which grew increasingly stronger. In the Middle East, sultans in the Ottoman Empire claimed religious authority, and they used the devshirme system, where civil servants and janissary troops were recruited from Christian families. The millet system was also used, which organized and administered non-Muslims into different categories, with non-Muslims paying the jizya or non-believers tax. Also in the Middle East, the Safavid Empire had a strong centralized government and administration, and this empire benefited from its location and gained wealth from the growing trade between European and Islamic civilizations. In East Asia, as we mentioned earlier, the Manchus took power after a peasant revolt and consolidated their rule over Mongolia, Tibet, and much of Central Asia. They also forced neighboring areas into a tributary system where they exchanged gifts and tribute with surrounding nations to ensure peace and diplomacy. The Qing dynasty also had strong and capable rulers who claimed the mandate to heaven, where one legitimate ruler had a blessing by the gods, and Confucianism also had an emphasis on respect for authority. And in Japan, there was a period of decentralization in the 1500s with daimyo competing for power, but it was reunified by three warlords, and Tokugawa declared himself shogun in 1603. This caused a restoration of order in Japan, and it also adopted a policy of isolationism, where Japan shut itself off from foreign ideas such as Christianity and restricted trade to Nagasaki. Also, during this period, their economy flourished and their population rose rapidly. In South Asia, the Mughals consolidated Muslim rule over India by using the landowning zamindar class as regional governors and tax collectors. The Mughals' economy also thrived off India's cotton trade. One of the most important Mughal rulers was Akbar the Great, who promoted religious tolerance, abolishing the jizya tax paid by non-Muslims and attempting to outlaw the Hindu practice of sati. And lastly, in Africa, European presence was established along its coast, where slaves were traded for gunpowder, which caused powerful states to arise in Western Africa. And also during this time period, the Muslim kingdom of Songhai arose, which used a complex bureaucracy and Islam to justify its rule.
Okay. For the influence of scientific learning and technological innovation in 1450 through 1750, people worldwide had begun to focus on improving their knowledge of gunpowder, weaponry, manufacturing, and maritime technology. They had also begun the process of looking into science and art during the Renaissances. Europe's path of development started with the Italian Renaissance, where literacy rates quickly improved along with scientific knowledge. The scientific discoveries, like the sun being the center of the universe, were quickly spread due to the newly developed and changing printing press. So in other words, newly learned information was able to spread across the land due to the new forms of printing and sharing information. And as more movements started, new topics were discussed, like the church and its standings in state during the Enlightenment, a time where people began to look more into individualism. With people realizing the church's power, they called for separation of the church and state, and also more freedom for other cultures and religions. Individualism was also very supported during the humanism movement that called for higher education and cultural development for the people of Europe. This movement is where many people have gotten the idea that the Renaissance focused on art, while in truth it had called for revised thinking in nearly every aspect of everyday life. Things regarded as typical would be altered because of this, like how the idea of an ordinary family structure changed in Europe as the common age that people got married was pushed back to around 20 years old. And then gunpowder had become a key aspect of Asia and the Americas, as both had begun to work on improving weapons and trade for the gunpowder-fueled inventions. While Asia had been working on maintaining control over its people with the studies of gunpowder, they had also remained in close contact with Europe as nations worked to improve the newly developments together. For example, we see people from both continents working together on printing tools when Gutenberg built upon old Asian printing technology in order to make the printing press, while incorporating aspects from the older movable type. America at the time had also been focusing on gunpowder much like Asia, but they did it in order to participate and create the triangular trade system. Those involved in the slave trading system would exchange the developed guns and any unprocessed materials for slaves. For this topic, CCOT, which I'm going to include now, I said maritime equipment and additions, like new combinations of sails, continued to be used and improved to enhance sea travel and navigation for many years after they were first made and constructed. And then for cause and effect, I wanted to include how, unlike other nations, the Japanese were more cautious and closed off when it came to welcoming European inventors and technology, because they were in isolation period along with other things. And then I have a question for the class as well that I want to ask. It's what piece of technology do you think was the most important and why?
Okay, Jill.
I think that it was the printing press because it allowed knowledge to be spread faster and it was not only was it faster, but it was more convenient and more people could have access to it.
Okay. Brooke?
I would agree with Bill, but also to add to it, is that it helps keep like documents of certain events and keep numbers, so to keep a more organized, like governments and like economic systems as well.
Katie and then Hannah.
The different like fabrics, because it allowed for people like women back then who weren't allowed to like talk as much and were supposed to be seen and not heard to express themselves in a sort of way more than they would have been in the past.
So you said a different what? Fabric?
Yeah, like allowed like more
Okay.
like versatility to like express themselves.
Sure. Hannah?
I think the improvements in gunpowder and weaponry were just the most influential around the world because, as we've seen, they've contributed to state building and growth and expansion, and have been used all over the world, whether that's for like good things or bad things, such as
Gunpowder. Yeah. The caravel, maybe?
some wartime stuff.
Yeah.
Maybe not,
Compass.
like maybe or improvement.
All right. Keep going, folks.
Now it's time for the Columbian Exchange. But before I start, make sure that you listen for some changes or results that were from the Columbian Exchange. Now, the Columbian Exchange was basically the exchanging and sharing of people, diseases, crops, animals, and goods. And Europe brought wheat, sugar, rice, coffee, horses, influenza, measles, and a whole bunch of other stuff with them. They also forcibly spread Christianity to the indigenous Americans, but did not adapt indigenous American beliefs in turn. The Columbian Exchange helped make Christianity a more global religion overall and helped them snuff out other religions in the New World. Because of the Columbian Exchange, the Europeans began to rely on potatoes from the Americas, which later resulted in a potato famine. The exchange and exploration in general was a chance for glory, gold, and religion. Sugar and coffee were also some of the most important plant introductions to the Americas. Now, Christopher Columbus is credited to discovering the New World, but this is debatable since there was, of course, already people living there. And he also presented mercantilism concepts, which basically focused on maximizing profit. That being said, Columbus was a pretty awful dude. A prime example of this being the Bahamas, where he put everyone into slavery. But in a way I like to think of as a small retribution, syphilis traveled all the way back to Europe. Now, the Europeans wanted free labor for their cash crops so they could make more money. And this resulted in the transatlantic slave trade, which was about the 15th century. Corn from the Americas also had a huge impact, just like potatoes. It boosted population, and it could grow in many places unsuitable for certain grains, so helped in famine resistance. Some important explorers from Europe was, of course, Christopher Columbus and Robert de La Salle. Next slide, please. Now, in the Americas, they were able to acquire new sources of hides, wool, and animal protein, as well as a variety of pack animals, one of these being horses, which was very helpful while hunting bison, for plowing, and for transportation. Wheels also helped with new transportation. The New World was introduced to animals that had important economic consequences, which made the Americas economy more like Eurasia and Africa. Sadly, these new animals also provoked farmers and herders, which caused new opportunities for political divisions. The New World was able to spread corn, potatoes, cassava, which, fun fact, has traces of cyanide in it, and tobacco, which is one of humankind's most important drugs because of its involvement in the economy. Like, if we take it out of the economy right now, it will literally collapse. A downside of the Columbian Exchange was the diseases. The diseases depopulated many of the societies in the New World, but overall, the spread of new crops and livestock increased the world's population. American silver, tobacco, and a few other items which were used by the native peoples for ritual purposes were used as European commodities with monetary value. In short, this disrupted the native economies and spurred early commercial capitalism. For the CCOT for this topic, I said that in later years of the Columbian Exchange, the trading and exchanging slowed down, but then picked up later in the 20th century with globalization. For the compare and contrast, I said that the Columbian Exchange was basically globalization round one. It was an exchange of ideas, foods, technology, weapon, and diseases. The same thing is happening now, just with a higher concentration of these subjects because of new technologies, mass communication, and consumerism. The Columbian Exchange also spread a lot of diseases, wiping out 95% of the population in the Americas, which we can see that globalization does that now in the past 2 years. And lastly, for the cause and effect, I said that the Columbian Exchange introduced new experiences in terms of weeds, pests, diseases, animals, and pets to the Americas. This caused new diseases and a massive death toll in the Americas because the indigenous people had no immunity to the new diseases and no helpful advantages to aid in their new way of life. After all of this, what are some changes that were results of the Columbian Exchange?
Jill,
Native populations in the New World quickly declining.
native populations in the New World quickly declining. Brooke.
The spread of Christianity and not preserving the indigenous peoples their religion before Christopher Columbus and
I didn't catch the last 8 words.
so like how Christianity was spreading through the indigenous people and how their religion was not viewed as like Christianized by the
Okay, so Christianity, the spread of it, and the ending of indigenous religion. Kaylee.
the next like trade began because the Europeans got free labor and all these big crops coming in.
European slave trade began because of the demand of labor in the Americas due to the killing of natives. Hannah and then Lucy.
Populations in the east, like in terms of China and Japan, grew as they got different kinds of foods like potatoes and corn.
All right, nice. So the Columbian Exchange helped grow the population in all over Afro-Eurasia, but particular China, Japan. Okay, Lucy.
The access to more crops help support different population sizes.
All right, so the access to more crops help build a larger population in particular areas. Well, those are good. Good question. Let's move on.
Okay, so for the development and expansion for maritime empires.
Who's speaking?
Nyla.
Okay, I'm gonna need you. I've got you on full blast and we can barely hear you. Can you speak up a little bit?
Okay. For the development and expansion for maritime empires, Portugal's trading post empire was first established along the African coast. They cooperated with African leaders, trading their people as slaves and receiving guns and gunpowder from the Portuguese. Additionally, they gained economic growth from trading. There were also cultural influences on the Africans from the Portuguese, including conversions to Christianity and influences on their art. On the other hand, the Japanese did not prefer the Portuguese's influence. As soon as the Japanese people started showing signs of European culture and conversions to Christianity, the emperor closed off all interactions with them, including their trading ports. For the rivalries of maritime expansion, the British drove the French out of India, gaining control of their trading ports. They were controlled by the British East India Company, but the company was heavily controlled by the Mughal leaders. The Spanish invaded Aztec and Incan empires, took control of the Aztecs in 1521, and they took over the Incans in 1572. After Spain took over parts of the Americas, They had disputes with the Portuguese over what land to control. The Treaty of Tordesillas fixed that by creating a median line where Spain got the west and half. The changes in the Indian Ocean trade network were the infusions with the European merchants. Before the Portuguese came, the Indian Ocean trade network was controlled by leaders with ethnic and religious ties. Even with all this going on, the Indian trades were still stable, and the Asian merchants were not affected by these changes. The hacienda system was a system where high powers / leaders offered land to the nobles for them to travel across the sea. They rented the land out to lower class Spaniards because they had debts and low wages, and they were less likely to stop working underneath the nobles. The encomienda system revolved around labor, and a small number of natives had access to their advantages, which was protection, education, and Christianity. In return, the nobles wanted labor. This system is similar to feudal Europe. So a quick comparison to the encomienda system to feudalism. The encomienda system revolved around protection and wealth, and labor was received as payment for the government. This is similar to feudalism, where people also gain land from working for the government. So to touch a little more on slavery, Africans were tightly packed on ships during the exploitation process. That made it easier for diseases to spread, and death from suffocation was more likely. If they managed to make it there alive, the slaves were separated from their communities and families upon arrival. This led to demographic issues and disrupted family organizations in Africa. And for the photos on the slides, on the left is an image of trading between the Africans and the Portuguese, specifically the Portuguese trading technology, guns and gunpowder, etc. The image on the right symbolizes people exploring with their improved ship technologies. And on the next slide, the map is showing the colonies and where they traded from, which is all color coded. And the places without a color didn't have a colony at the time. So for my question, I have, how do you think the Indian Ocean trade network would operate if the Portuguese never colonized there?
How would the Indian Ocean trade network have adapted had the Europeans never arrived? What do you think? Am I allowed to answer? Somebody else answer. All right, fine, I'll answer. It's a fun question. I think China would eventually have dominated the Indian Ocean trade network. I think Zheng He would have continued to sail, or they would have possibly not became so independent and isolated, and you might have a larger Chinese zone today. Had the Europeans not came in, used force and technology to change the system. Okay, group online. I'm going to give everybody 120 seconds to stand up, jump around in circles, do whatever they need to do, okay? Is that okay with you? Because we have half the period tomorrow. Can I get any consensus from anybody in your group?
Yeah.
Okay, 1 minute. So everyone has 2 minutes, 120 seconds to do whatever you need to do. I'm stretching my legs. "70 seconds. I got sciatica from sitting there. 55 seconds. All right, 30-second timer. All right, group, let's get started or continue. Sorry.
Okay, next is like our group activity. We have a review SAQ for this first half of our presentation. You will have 5 minutes to, you guys can get into small groups to discuss each of the questions.
Let's go ahead and we'll break them into 3 groups and we'll spend 5 minutes. Each group discuss one of the questions and then tell us what you would come with your answer, okay? All right, so the 5 of you are a group. 5 of you, and then Jake move, Barker move over, or Sam move over, Jackson move over. Okay, these 2 rows, and then get over, Jackson. Then the 7 or 8 of you are a group. Okay, you have A, Jill, your group has A. These 2 rows right here has B, you all have C. You got 5 minutes, go. Move around, look at each other awkwardly. So Lily, what's the game plan for the rest of the period, just so I can be prepared?
I think we have 2 more topics.
Type it in the chat box, will you please? You've got about 15 minutes as of right now.
So we could say one consequence was death, and its effect was loss of cultures in the United States. Yeah, I was just. I know what it
Okay, you've got 60 seconds left, then we're gonna share out.
Oh, I know. So how about the ability of better navigational skills, and ability to not travel along the coast? Is this allowed Magellan to circumnavigate the whole globe? And I think towards 1543. And I wish it had so bad. Oh my god. I know, when I was like, I think
Okay. Let's go ahead and walk through these questions now. So Lily Dole, I want you to read the first one out loud, please.
Okay. A is name one consequence of the Columbian Exchange and explain its effect.
Okay, so that question goes to Jill and group. Let's see what you came up with. Who's gonna do the talking, or else I'm gonna cold call? All right, Ethan, roll out.
Okay. One consequence of was the introduction of new diseases, and the effect of that was that 95% of the population was wiped out in America. And I said that that could have further resulted in the loss of culture within the native populations because,
Yeah, that's good. That's ACE. That's 3 sentences, 95% due to disease, death. That is evidence that is specific. Okay, I think I'm only 7 or 8 SAQs done, like from having graded everybody's over the last 2 days. I did put comments in there. Most of them were lacking evidence, and that's where you have to come up with specifics. That would have counted. That's good. All right, let's go to group B. Name one effect of new technologies from maritime empires and explain their significance.
So one.
Real loud, a lot louder than that.
One development.
Nope, that wasn't louder.
Okay, one technological development from maritime expansion that helped contribute or that had an effect was the development of better navigational tools and ability to sail not just based on the coast but across the ocean. And an example of this was I'm at a loss of words. The traveler Magellan to circumnavigate the globe in I think 1543. And this is important because it allowed for the exploration and like creation of links between, or it allowed for a truly global trading to happen as it connected the Americas, which were previously isolated with more of Europe and Asia and the East.
Good. C, explain the cultural impact the Italian Renaissance had on European society. Brooke, louder than Hiddle.
The cultural impact.
Come on, rip it.
Cultural impact on the from the Italian Renaissance on the European society was that it had a rebirth in Western Europe, and a cultural movement called humanism was an example of this. And humanism was a focus on human potential and achievement, which could then lead for the people to be more motivated to increase their technology and know what their potential is.
Good. ACE. Boom. Was there specific evidence there? Yeah, great job. All right, group, you got exactly 10 minutes, I think. Wow, fancy.
So for answer A, which I'm pretty sure was already said, I mentioned the decline of the indigenous American populations and their connection with diseases.
For B, I said one effect that new technologies had for maritime empires was control over the Indian Ocean trade network by using guns, gunpowder, and cannons. This affected the people in control of the trade network, and the previous leaders that were taught religiously and ethically were now out of control.
Yeah, so for C, we just mentioned that there were new ideas of humanism and individualism, and also that there was a revival of classical Greek and Roman art and culture.
Okay, so this will be our last topic for today, and that is internal.
Lily, pause. We can't hear you. Lily.
England began to seize control of trade routes
Hey,
are you-
Lily Dole, start back to the beginning. We couldn't hear you. You lost the connection.
Oh no. Okay. Okay. Sorry. So I'm doing internal and external challenges to power. And so I'll start with Europe. The development of the parliament changed the way power was distributed in European monarchies. This development meant that there would be a power shift from the monarchs to the established parliament. Europe, especially England, began to seize control of trade routes on already existing states in Asia. The Reformation took place in Europe and challenged the Catholic Church's authority over Christianity. In the Middle East, the Ottoman Empire faced the Safavid Empire and won a battle against them, which ultimately checked Safavid power. Successors of Suleiman the Magnificent, an Ottoman Empire leader, were unable to provide solutions to problems in the Ottoman Empire. The empire faced inflation, environmental issues, and famines, which slowly hammered away at Ottoman power. The Ottoman Empire lost a lot of land in Europe to Austria and Russia, which contributed to its decline in power. In Africa, the kingdom of Songhai prospered until Moroccan forces destroyed it. Morocco invasion was brought on by their need for money. Europe posed a threat to many African nations due to the Atlantic slave trade, which devastated African populations. Congo, an African nation, was forced to have a partnership with the Portuguese, which was an external challenge to their power. There were wars between Boers and the Zulu, another African nation, which were then broken up by Amani Arabs, which pushed the Boers out of many cities. Despite these conflicts, the Boers still remained a major colonial presence. In East Asia, the Ming Dynasty government was unable to properly respond to widespread famine and the environmental issues, which ultimately led to the Manchu people of the north taking control of the Ming Dynasty, beginning a new dynasty, the Qing Dynasty. Japan faced disunity and economic breakdown, so three warlords and Tokugawa reunited Japan, and by then, European influences were considered a threat to Japan, which caused them to close down their Japan from trade. In South Asia, Aurangzeb he was a descendant of the tolerant Mughal leader Akbar. He became intolerant of non-Muslims in the Mughal Empire, which caused there to be religious struggles. These religious struggles caused the Mughal Empire to decline. Eventually, British colonialism would bring an end to the Mughal Empire, and it became a weak colonial possession. And do we have time for a question? Or I had two questions.
Yeah.
Okay.
You got 5 minutes.
My first question is.
Say 4 minutes.
Oh, okay. So my first question is: describe some internal challenges to power in some places, into the places I said.
Internal challenges for power. Hannah.
The dissatisfaction of people or lower people with how the government was handling things such as famines and probably poverty.
Okay, that answer feels like saying yes, but where?
In China, the Ming Dynasty.
Okay, Ming Dynasty. There you go. Just want to make sure that you're always backing some evidence, because after having read 400 SAQs, what it felt like 400, I don't know how many it was yesterday and today. If you don't use specific evidence, yeah, they won't give you that point. That's good though. Okay, anywhere else, or you want to go to the next question, Lily Dole?
The next question is the same thing except with external challenges to power. What were some external challenges?
External challenges to power, 1450 to 1750. Jill.
Muslim religions conflicting with other religions.
So religious conflict. Okay. Katie.
European countries coming into Africa and trying to take over.
European countries, also Asia as well, and the Indian Ocean Trade Network for sure. Or destroying classic civilizations like the Aztec and the Inca. Okay, or Native American tribes, in the eastern part of the of North America as well. All right, good. Hey, for the first, for 66% done, let's give this group a round of applause. Okay, let me be straightforward with everybody, okay? This packet is very thorough. You guys, your group did a nice job putting that together, but that means the more thorough it is, the more you have to study. So your homework tonight is as follows. Make sure you're actually listening and not putting stuff in your bag right now or getting your phone out. That's when Mr. Burnett loses it. Okay. And I stopped on time to play. Homework is to go through this packet and find your what's called pain points. Pain points are the things that you don't know. And remember, because I am almost fairly confident that that's going to end up in those multiple choice questions. Some themes from 1450 to 1750, and they're not going to be, I'll be shocked if more than 3 questions are about Europe in that 1450 to 1750. So they're not going to be Reformation or Renaissance. They're probably going to be Indian Ocean Trade Network for sure. Possibly, I would bet that there's going to be something on the the gunpowder empires. The effect of the slave trade on the continent of Africa and the indigenous people from Africa and the natives in the Americas as well. The lesser populations are going to get more attention. And honestly, I feel like there's going to be a little bias in the test this year towards like representing underrepresented people in history too. That makes sense. I think because of the way that the nation is moving right now. Again, if I had to be a predictor, I think they're going to be looking for you not to be able to tell me the definition of what the Renaissance was, but they're going to want you to tell me, about women's rights in the Middle East between the Shiites and the Sunnis. So I think that's going to be more, like I said, something more like that. And then if you did not, the last thing then for homework, if you did not review the AP instructions and play around on your computer yet and get it set up. I want that done tonight so that we can go over it tomorrow, troubleshoot tomorrow for about 10-15 minutes. And it doesn't take us an hour to work it out, okay? Anybody have any questions for me? Yes, Lucy.
No, I just have a question over the SAP, I guess. I mean, not yesterday, but when you graded them yesterday.
Yeah.
Where can we see the notes? Because I can see notes.
Oh, I made comments on the grading thing. All right, group, great job, by the way. I'm going to end this Zoom meeting. Thank you.
We